Tonight, please set down the weariness on your shoulders and leave all the rushing, anxiety, and turmoil of the ordinary world in the dusty haze beyond the mountains. We are about to pass through 700 years of time and return to the northern alpine route of the Middle Ages, to that stone-built shepherd's hut hidden in the folds of the valley, where only you live. At this moment, you are the only shepherd in this valley. 10 years ago, carrying a newborn sheepdog, you fled from the war-ravaged plains to this place. By the stream at the foot of the mountain, you built this stone house with your own hands, stacking stones from the valley one by one. You keep 20 sheep, and by shearing wool and selling cheese, you have traded for the salt and tools needed to survive the winter. Guarding this valley and guarding your flock, you have shut the wars of the plains, the Lord's exactions, and the plundering of soldiers and bandits all beyond the unbroken snowy mountains. Outside the window, a blizzard that has been brewing for half a month is pressing down into the valley along the ridges of the Alps. The lead-gray clouds hang so low they nearly brush the distant snowy peaks. The wind is packed with icy grit, and when it sweeps through the pines in the valley, it lets out a long, hollow wail. In no more than 6 hours, the sky-filling snow will seal shut the only road leading to the town beyond the mountains, turning this stone house into a white island cut off from the world. But there is nothing frightening in that. On the contrary, it means a complete and thorough release, an absolute peace that no one can disturb. In this long northern winter night that seems as though it has no end, you will seal every crack in the stone house with your own hands. Stoke the hearth until the fire roars all the way up the stone chimney. Take down the smoked pork, sausages, and wind-dried venison hanging thick in the smokehouse. Varm the apple cider you brewed in autumn by the fireplace, and, while the wind and snow lash the stone walls, enjoy the abundance and ease that belong to a shepherd deep in the mountains alone. Our story begins with the layer of cold glinting white frost wrapped around the whole valley at dawn. In the early morning, you are awakened by the crisp popping of charcoal in the hearth. The soul of the stone house is in the fireplace. The oak logs you banked beneath the ashes before sleep still hold a dark red warmth after the night has passed. The scent of fruitwood drifts through the cracks in the stone into the inner bedroom, mingling with the sharp breath of the cedar forest that floats in from outside the window. It is a kind of reassurance carved into your bones. You pull on that thick wool coat, the one you spun and wove yourself from the fleece of your own sheep. The stitches are not especially fine, but it is solid enough to keep out the fiercest wind in the valley. Stepping across the stone floor into the outer room, you find Old Ache, the sheepdog by the hearth, lifting his head at once. White fur has grown around his muzzle. He has stayed with you in this valley for a full 10 years. The only living creature inside this stone hut besides you. Saying you awake, he wags his tail and comes over, rubbing his head warmly against your palm. You push open the heavy oak door. A biting gust of cold wind rushes in at once, cutting your cheeks with pain. The lashes exposed to the air instantly glaze over with a fine layer of frost. The world outside has been completely transformed by last night's hard freeze. In the clearing before the house, every stone is wrapped in a bright shell of ice that cracks sharply underfoot. The leafless branches of the old oak in the corner of the yard are coated in frost, like white jade canes, gleaming coldly in the gray light. The long chain of alpine snow mountains in the distance, the bare dark rock, the ink-green cedar forest, are all veiled in a translucent whiteness. Like an oil painting hung in a church, their outlines softened. You do not do as you usually do, driving the flock out to graze in the valley before dawn. Instead, you lean sideways against the wooden doorframe, pull the collar of your wool coat tighter, and take a deep breath of the cold valley air. That chill, carrying the scents of pine boughs, frozen earth, and moss, drives straight through your nose into your lungs with the fierce edge unique to winter in the north. It makes you cough softly twice, but it also clears the fog from your mind in an instant. Even the snowfinches perched on the slope opposite seem close enough for you to count the markings on their wings. This is an unpeopled valley on the northern alpine route. Unlike the villages on the plain beyond the mountains, ruled by lords, there are no tax-collecting knights here, no press-ganging soldiers or bandits, no refugees driven from their homes by famine. The unbroken snowy mountains are a natural barrier. Only a narrow goat path hidden in the stream valley leads to the small town beyond the mountains. And in ordinary times you take it only when you carry cheese and wool on your back to trade for things you need. Even if outsiders could find the mouth of the valley, they would not dare step far inside. There are sheer cliffs in the valley, and now and then brown bears and wild wolves appear. In winter, a blizzard can bury a whole person in the snow. The little town beyond the mountains has long since become a place of dread and unease. Last month, when you went to barter for salt, the blacksmith in the tavern said the fighting in the south had only grown fiercer. The lords were seizing one another's lands. Young men were being dragged off everywhere to serve. As soldiers, many villages had been stripped bare, fields lay waste, houses had been burned, and common people could only flee into the mountains. Bread had tripled in price. A gin of coarse salt cost 5 copper coins. Even firewood for winter had become much more expensive. The old shopkeeper who sold salt advised you, young man, stock up on more things. No one knows how long this war will last, or how long this winter will stay cold. You unloaded your goods, traded for enough coarse salt, rye flour, and ironed for repairs to last the whole winter, then hurried back toward the valley. The longer you stayed outside, the more you felt that the panic of the troubled world would cling to your wool coat. Only when you returned to this valley, to your stone house, did that heart suspended in your chest finally settle. Back then, when you fled the fires of war and forced your way deeper and deeper into the mountains, wasn't it for precisely a place like this? A place where you did not need to care who won the war, did not have to hand over crushing taxes to a lord, did not need to fear the pillaging of soldiers and bandits. All you had to do was guard your flock, guard your stone house, sow a small patch of rye, brew a cask of apple cider, and live your days steadily and peacefully. You lower your gaze to your feet. Ake has tucked his head beneath his belly, curling up beside the wooden door where it is sheltered from the wind, with only his wet black nose exposed. He has run the valley with you for 10 years and is your best helper when you herd sheep. Even the naughtiest ewe can be driven obediently back into the fold by him. When wolves appear, he dares to throw himself forward and fight for his life. But today he has no interest at all in charging into the snow. Only his ears twitch, as if that counts as saying hello. Dogs are the most perceptive of creatures. He has long since scented the snow in the wind, quite contentedly. He is conserving his heat, waiting to help you endure the coming snowfall that may last for days. You stretch out your hand and catch a frost flower that falls from the oak branches. It lands hard in your palm, bitterly cold, and in 2 seconds melts into a pool of chill water. The wind carries a faint earthy smell, along with the heavy dampness of moisture condensing in the air. That is a sign of heavy snow in the mountains. There is no mistaking it. The old hunters passed down a saying, when the frost creatures appear, snow is coming. When the wind tightens, the mountain closes fast. Today the frost is hard as iron, and the wind is full of weighty moisture that seems to drag a person down. This snow will not be a small one. It will fall for at least 3 days and 3 nights, and if the mountain closes for half a month, that would not be surprising. For you, a shepherd, once this heavy snow arrives, the work of grazing will stop completely. You will not need to drive the flock to the slopes before daylight, not need to guard against wolves stealing sheep in the valley, not need to climb over mountains and ridges looking for lost lambs. At last, you can stay in the stone house openly and without guilt, spending a few lazy days eating, sleeping, and eating again. You tighten the belt of your wool coat, turn around, and take from behind the door the old oak carrying basket you have used for many years. Then you tuck the hunting knife, worn smooth and bright with use, into your belt. Before the snow comes down, you need to hurry into the forest in the valley. Check the traps you set earlier, lay in more meat for winter, and inspect the sheepfold on the way, making sure the flock has enough hay. The instant Ache sees you take the basket, he gets to his feet, circling you excitedly, his tail wagging like a little drumstick. You pat his head, lock the wooden door, and take the path in front of the house first toward the sheepfold nearby. The sheepfold is one you built yourself from stone and oak. The roof is layered thick with thatch, and all four sides are tightly sealed except for a small vent left for airflow. It can keep out the fiercest cold wind in the valley. 20 sheep are packed together on the hay, huddled close and warm. Hearing your voice, they all lift their heads and bleat. You inspect the stone trough. There is still plenty of hay inside. The water in the trough has not frozen yet. The fence is intact too, with no sign that wolves have damaged it. You let out a breath of relief. These sheep are the foundation of your life in this valley. Their wool can be exchanged for money, their milk can be made into cheese, and in spring they will bear lambs. As long as the flock remains sound, there is nothing to fear from winter. You add enough fresh hay to the trough, pat the lead ewe on the head, and only then turn toward the forest. The path under your feet is one you have trampled out over 10 years. The frozen ground is hard as flagstone. Your boots crunch sharply over the frost-coated dead grass, the sound carrying far through the silent valley. You follow the path into the forest. On both sides rise tall cedar woods. Frost clings to the dark green needles, and when the wind blows, little grains of frost fall whispering down. The deeper you go, the denser the forest becomes. Pine, oak, and beech branches cross overhead and cover most of the sky, leaving only slivers of morning light to leak through the leaves and fall on the ground, thick with dead leaves. The air is rich with the fresh scent of pine boughs and humus, together with the clean, keen breath peculiar to the 12th month of winter. Drawn into your lungs, it is cold and silken, and yet it stills the heart. By instinct and habit, you turn into the shady slope hidden deep in the forest. There lie the 5 spring snares you set 3 days earlier. The old hunter outside the mountains taught you how to make them. You take a springy conifer sapling, bend it down, and bury it into the earth, even. If it stays bent for half a month, it will not snap. Then you tie a sliding loop from the strongest rawhide cord and hide it under the leaves, propping the center up with a twig as thin as a straw, the trigger stick, as hunters call it. As soon as a hoof touches that stick, the bent sapling flies up in an instant and can hoist an animal weighing dozens of gin into the air so that it cannot struggle free. Sure enough, the moment you step onto the slope, you see that the top of the innermost oak has snapped upright and straight. A plump roe deer is hanging by one hind leg, firmly suspended in midair. A layer of white frost coats its tawny hide. Its body has already gone stiff, but there is still a trace of warmth beneath the fur, so it must only just have been caught. Your heart brightens with joy. This is fine luck. Roe deer meat is wonderfully tender, with not the slightest rankness. Its fibers are as fine as cotton thread and smell 10 times richer than the beef sold in the little town beyond the mountains. Once a whole hide like this is properly tanned, it can fetch half a sack of good rye flour in town. And it can also be sewn into a warm fur lining for the collar of the wool coat you have worn thin so that next winter, when you herd sheep, you will no longer fear the cold wind drilling down your neck. Carefully, you take the roe deer down, tie it firmly with rawhide cord, and stow it in the bottom of the basket. Then you inspect the other 4 traps. They are all intact and show no sign of being disturbed. You adjust the trigger sticks again, cover the leaves back over them exactly as before, and leave them to wait for after the heavy snow, when you can return to see whether there is fresh game. Once that is done, you do not leave at once. Instead, you walk to the foot of the ancient oak in the middle of the forest. It is a tree that must be hundreds of years old, so broad that it would take 2 grown men to encircle it with their arms. Its bark is split like dragon scales, and its branches spread far and wide like a giant open umbrella. It is the king of the forest here, and also the place where the hunters of the mountains believe the mountain god comes to rest. From the cloth bundle in your arms, you take out 2 pieces of rye bread freshly baked that morning, and a handful of roasted hazelnuts, things you ordinarily begrudge yourself, and gently set them on the smooth blue stone beneath the roots, polished by the mountain spring. You do not speak. You simply bow gravely and carefully to the old oak. This is the understanding between you and this alpine valley. The old hunters used to say that when you enter the mountain, you receive a bowl of rice, and when you leave it, you bring back a load of goods. All that you eat and use is bestowed by the mountain god. On days when the weather is about to turn and the mountain is about to close, an offering must be made to ask for peace and smooth passage, and to pray that every living creature in the mountains may survive the winter. After doing all this, you brush the dirt from your hands as if you have just completed something of great importance, and your heart feels very steady. Not daring to delay, you follow the path toward the mouth of the valley to inspect the one narrow road that leads out to the world beyond. The fallen leaves on the road are thick and show no marks of being trodden, only your own old footprints and the tracks of wild animals. There is no sign that any outsider has come through. You relax completely. As long as no stranger has found and entered this path, your valley is safe. You can continue to hide in these deep mountains and live your own life. However fierce the war outside may be, it cannot burn its way into the deep Alps. On the way back, you cut a bundle of oak logs and another bundle of dried applewood. Applewood is the best thing for smoking meat. Meat smoked over it carries a faint sweetness of fruit, red and glossy with oil, and can keep for a whole year without spoiling. Oak burns long and steady, and is the best fuel for the hearth. By the roadside thickets, you also gather plenty of dried rosemary, thyme, and bay leaves. These are indispensable spices for curing and smoking meat. Treasures found everywhere in the valley, more fragrant than those sold in the spice shop in town. By the time you return to the stone house with the basket full on your back, it is already morning well advanced. The sun has climbed higher, the morning mist has scattered, and the whole valley lies clear to the eye. The stone walls of the house glow warmly in the sunlight. The stream before the house tinkles and runs. It is a mountain spring from deep in the mountains that never dries up in any season. You rely on this one stream for drinking, washing clothes, and watering the sheep. You have barely reached the door when Ake suddenly barks twice toward the forest. Though he does not rush forward, he simply pricks his ears in warning. You stop. Grip the hunting knife at your waist. Hold your breath and look that way. After a moment, a full-grown stag steps out of the woods and onto the open ground, 10 or so paces away. Its antlers are huge, branching toward the sky like dead limbs of a tree. Its thick winter coat is dusted with frost, and it lowers its head to nibble at the moss on the ground. It has clearly noticed you too. It jerks up its head. A pair of amber eyes stare straight into yours, and 2 puffs of white breath stream from its nostrils. Yet it neither runs nor lowers itself to attack. It simply stands there quietly, facing you, so you and the stag stand no more than a dozen paces apart, looking at one another in silence. Today is the 12th day of the winter month, 7 days before the winter solstice, a day that the old hunters called a turning point between yin and yang. The elders used to say that on this day the wild creatures in the mountains and human beings are equal, all children of the great mountain, and one must not give rise to the intent to kill. Slowly, you release the hand gripping your knife and slide the blade back into its sheath at your waist. You lift your hand lightly toward the stag, a shepherd's greeting to the beings that live in the mountains. As if it understands your goodwill, the stag flicks its ears, lowers its head to mouth a little more moss, then turns and walks with steady steps into the thick woods nearby. In a short while it is gone, leaving only a few deep hoofprints in the snow. This chance encounter adds a certain solemnity to the haste that had driven you, as though the mountain itself had been watching you, and it leaves in you a warmth that is difficult to explain. You are not a passing stranger in these mountains, not an outsider who has come merely to take. You are someone who keeps watch over this valley together with the other living creatures. You are all children of the mountain. After a short rest, you begin preparing the meat for curing and smoking. You take the roe deer from the basket and lay it on the wooden chopping board outside the stone house. Then draw from your waist the hunting knife sharpened to extraordinary keenness. You saved up 2 years' worth of wool to have the town blacksmith forge this blade for you. Its steel is excellent, sharp enough to slice a hair on the wind. It is the handiest thing you own in the mountains. First, you cut a small opening at the joint of the hind leg. Then, following the seam between skin and flesh, little by little, you peel off the hide. Your movements are practiced, almost like undressing someone. Before long, the entire hide comes away whole, without a single tear. Once it is properly dressed, it can be used either as a fur lining for boots or as a warm hide mat spread over the bed in winter to keep out the cold seeping from the stone house. Once the hide is off, what remains is clean roe deer meat, firm, and a beautiful dark red, true game with not a trace of excess fat and yet wonderfully tender. Without any rank smell, your knife moves quickly along the joints and seams of bone. In just a few strokes, the great pieces of meat are freed from the skeleton. You do not throw away the bones either. They will make the freshest broth base for the evening meal. For meat that is to be smoked and stored through winter, the way it is cut is most important. It cannot be cubed, and it cannot be sliced into short strips. It must be cut into long strips 3 fingers wide and 2 feet long, with the skin left on, so that when it hangs to smoke, it will not fall apart and will smoke more evenly. You hold down the dark red venison, tilt the blade, and put strength into your wrist. Strip after strip falls neatly into the wooden basin beside you, each one marbled evenly with lean and fat. Then comes the curing. This is the most crucial step in making smoked meat. It is a recipe the old butcher in the town taught you, and not the slightest error will do. You pour coarse salt into the iron pot, then crush the rosemary, thyme, and bay leaves you picked earlier in the mortar and add them to the pot. Over a low flame, you stir-fry them slowly. As the salt and spices warm, their fragrance is drawn out bit by bit. Savory freshness and salinity mingle together and soon fill the whole stone house. Even Ake, lying nearby, is lured over by the smell and sits by the chopping board, staring curiously into the pot. This too is an old rule. The salt has to be heated before it will penetrate deep into the fibers of the meat. That way, it seasons thoroughly, locks in the juices, and prevents spoilage. However damp and cold a northern winter may be, the meat will not go bad. Once the salt and spices are scorching hot, and their aroma is at its strongest, you remove the pot from the fire and let it cool just enough so it no longer burns the hand. Then the curing can begin. You take a strip of meat and rub the hot salt and spice mixture evenly into every part of it. Onto the skin, into the grain of the lean, into the seams of the fat. Not the slightest patch can be missed. The thicker places must be rubbed several times and worked hard so that the cure penetrates all the way through and the flavor inside and out will be even. The meat, once salted, must be laid skin side down in layers inside a clean oak barrel. This oak barrel is one you traded half a sheep for, reserved solely for curing meat and used for many years. The walls of the barrel are soaked through with the fragrance of meat and wine, and the meat cured in it takes on a mellow scent unique to oak. You arrange the meat one strip at a time. With each layer, you add another sprinkling of the fried salt and spices, making sure every piece is wrapped up tight in the cure. When the last piece goes in, the oak barrel is filled to the brim. You fetch a clean block of granite and press it on top. That forces out the blood and juices, makes the meat firmer, allows the cure to penetrate more thoroughly, and keeps the meat from floating and taking the seasoning unevenly. After you fit the lid in place, the rest is left to time. The old recipe says the meat must cure for a full 7 days and 7 nights. Every day, the strips in the barrel have to be turned over and rearranged from top to bottom so that each one absorbs the cure evenly. Only after 7 days can it be taken out, washed clean of blood, and hung in the smokehouse. There it must be slowly smoked over apple wood for half a month before it becomes that glossy, rich smoked meat that can hang in a ventilated place for a whole year without spoiling. Whenever you want some, you simply cut off a piece, wash it clean, and fry it, boil it, or roast it. However it is cooked, it is good. When the curing barrel is sealed, you rest a little, drink a mouthful of the apple cider cooling nearby, and begin working on the rest of the meat. Some of the leaner meat you mince. Finally, mix with lard, salt, and spices, and stuff into cleaned pig intestines to make sausages. These too will hang in the smokehouse. They are the most convenient winter food of all. When you go out to herd sheep, you can tuck 2 of them into your coat, and if hunger comes, you can eat them on the spot. Another portion of the meat you slice thin, rub with salt and spices, and hang in a ventilated place to dry into jerky, which keeps even longer and makes the best ration for herding in spring the next year. By the time the work of laying in meat is finished, the sun is already slanting westward. The mountain wind has grown cold again. Clouds have thickened more and more at the horizon, lead gray and dense, covering even the pointed summits of the distant snowy mountains. You know the snow really is about to come. You do not dare delay. You put down what is in your hands and begin reinforcing your stone house, the fortress that will shelter you through the deep mountain winter. There is no room for the slightest carelessness. The winter wind in the north slips through every crack. Even the smallest gap in a stone wall will let the cold pour in and carry all the warmth away. You first walk around the house, inspecting the seams between the stones. You built this house with your own hands, all of it from granite gathered in the stream valley, and you sealed the joints with clay mixed with hemp fiber. 10 years later, it is still firm and steady, only here and there, where stone joins stone, tiny cracks have appeared because of the expansion and contraction of heat and cold. From the woodshed you bring out the dried moss and hemp fibers you prepared long ago, mix them with clay, and press them little by little into the cracks, smoothing the surface carefully with a trowel. This moss that grows everywhere in the mountains, once dried and mixed into clay, can keep every bit of cold wind outside. Then come the windows. You inspect each wooden shutter on both sides of the stone house. Grease the hinges with a little tallow so they move smoothly. And stuff moss into the gaps around the frames too, leaving only one small front window for ventilation. Outside that window there is also the thick wooden panel you made yourself. Once the snow grows heavy in the night, you will lower it and wedge it fast, shutting out the wind and snow completely. At last you go to the woodshed behind the house, for people who live deep in the mountains. Even if the stone house were cut off, they could still go into the mountains to lay snares or gather wild fruit. But if the fire were cut off, then in a winter night, cold enough to freeze dripping water solid, what would wait for you would be a cold you could not survive. You push open the woodshed door, and the scent of dry oak washes over you. Inside, a whole wall is stacked in neat rows with dry firewood, every stick chopped and hauled back one axe stroke at a time since the beginning of autumn. Oak, elm, applewood, all hard woods that burn hottest and longest. There is enough to last you the whole winter. In one corner of the shed stand the charcoal baskets you burned in the earth kiln during summer, all made from hardwood. They burn long, give little smoke, and keep a steady bed of heat. The finest thing for the heart. 2 large baskets, full to the top enough to last until spring. You scoop up a basket of charcoal, grab a handful of resin-rich pine kindling, and carry them back to the stone house. This pine kindling catches instantly and is the best thing mountain people have for starting a fire. Cradling the charcoal and kindling in your arms, you feel steadier than if you were carrying gold coins. Beyond the mountains, charcoal costs as much as silver. But here in the deep mountains, it is the most tangible gift the mountain gives you. Once the fuel is prepared, dusk has already begun to gather. The wind grows stronger and stronger, making the corners of the stone house moan. At last the first snowflake begins to fall. It drifts down lazily, landing on the bluestone slab outside the door and melting cold and instantly. Then a second and a third. The flakes grow denser, changing from scattered grains into a full, whirling fall of goose-feather snow drifting into the valley with the wind. The snow has finally come. You hurry to close the heavy oak door and brace it hard with a wooden bar, shutting the shrieking wind and the endless storm of snow outside. The stone house falls almost immediately quieter. You walk to the fireplace, crouch down, and begin to light the fire. First, you scrape aside yesterday's ashes to reveal the embers beneath, still faintly warm. You lay on a handful of dry pine needles, strike sparks with the flint to catch the tinder, and once the pine needles are burning, you add the finely split resinous pine kindling. With a sharp crackle, bright yellow flames leap up at once, and the scent of pine spreads through the room. Though it carries a little smoke in the harsh cold of winter, it brings an extraordinary peace to the heart. Only when the kindling is burning strong and the flame has steadied do you set the prepared oak logs on one by one. Hardwood catches slowly and has to be tended with patience. It will not be hurried. You sit on the low stool beside the fireplace, watching the flames lick at the wood little by little, until the edges of the logs begin to glow a dark red. The dancing open flame slowly turns into a stable, mellow inner burn. Warmth fills the entire hearth, and a current of heat spreads along the floor, baking the whole stone house into comfortable warmth. Ake, who has been sitting nearby all this time, shuffles over too, squinting as he settles on the wool rug by the fire, belly turned to the glowing hearth, a contented rumble sounding in his throat. Once the fireplace is burning strongly, you pick up the copper kettle from the corner and go beneath the eaves outside. There stands a big wooden tub filled with the clean snow you deliberately collected the day before from pine needles. By now it has melted into clear snow water. The old hunters used to say that snow water is heaven's spring, best for brewing tea, making soup, and fermenting wine, sweet and pure, lacking the faint astringency of mountain spring water. You ladle several scoops into the copper kettle and hang it on the hook by the fireplace to warm slowly. Now that you have fire and hot water, What remains is a good fresh dish. From the oak barrel, you take out the sauerkraut you pickled in autumn. Then you cut a piece of last year's smoked meat and add the wild carrots you dug up that morning. You find a cast iron pot and set it on the tripod above the fire. First, you put in the smoked meat and render out its fat slowly over a small flame. The salty fragrance bursts into the room at once. Then you add slices of ginger, the carrots, and the pickled cabbage. Stir them a few times. Pour in the warm snow water, cover the pot, and leave it to simmer. Very soon the soup inside begins to bubble. The salty richness of the smoked meat mingles with the sweet freshness of the vegetables and rises with the steam, filling the whole house with a smell that makes a person feel safe. While the stew cooks, you go to the storeroom and bring out the rye bread you baked in autumn. You cut 2 thick slices and toast them on the stone slab by the fire. Before long, the bread turns crisp and golden brown, giving off a rich grain fragrance. You wash 2 potatoes as well and bury them in the ashes by the fireplace, letting the residual heat of the charcoal roast them slowly. By the time the meal is done, you will have soft, sweet baked potatoes to eat too. The cast iron pot bubbles away. The charcoal in the hearth glows warmly. Outside the window, the snow falls harder and harder, thick goose feather flakes descending in dense silence. The wind batters the stone walls with a long, hollow moan. Yet inside the stone house it is quiet and warm. There is only the boiling of the iron pot, the occasional crack of charcoal bursting, and the sound of ache snoring. You sit on the low stool by the fire, watching the dancing flames, smelling the meat simmering in the pot, listening to the storm outside. Your heart is as still as the deep pool in the valley, without the slightest ripple. Outside the mountains, people live in terror amid war, struggling under the oppression of lords, unable to eat their fill or keep themselves warm, not even knowing whether they will still be alive tomorrow. But here, deep in the Alps, you have your own food, a warm, blazing hearth, a barrel full of newly cured meat, rows of sausages and wind-dried meat hanging in the smokehouse, a whole jar of apple cider brewed in autumn, rye flour enough to spare, and the mountain's own gifts of game and herbs. You need not fear conscription, harsh taxes, or the hidden malice of human strife. You can simply live your own little life in peace and steadiness. Wasn't this exactly the kind of life you fought for when you fled the war and hid yourself in these vast mountains? You do not need to care who has won outside or who has become Lord. You do not need to trouble yourself with the rules of the world. You only need to guard this mountain, this house, and your flock. Tend your own rye, cure your own meat, brew your own cider. Eat your fill, stay warm, and carry your life through safely. Before long, the smoked meat vegetable soup is ready. You lift the lid of the cast iron pot, and steam rushes up at once. The milky broth is rolling gently. The vegetables have soaked up the fat of the smoked meat and gleam with freshness. The smoked meat has stewed until soft and rich, salty, and deeply flavored. You take the pot down, bring over the crisp rye bread, fill yourself a great bowl of soup, and begin eating in big mouthfuls. One sip of hot soup sends warmth through your whole body. One bite of crisp bread brings an intense scent of grain. One bite of the soft smoked meat is savory and full. Outside, the snowstorm still howls as if it means to swallow the whole valley. Yet that ferocious sound seems very far away. The colder, more chaotic, and more turbulent the outer world becomes, the more precious and grounding the warmth in this room feels. When the meal is done, you clear away the bowls and utensils. Wash them in the hot water by the hearth and set them aside. Then from the fireplace ashes you dig out the potatoes that have been roasting for so long. Their skins have turned black, shriveled, and charred, looking almost like lumps of coal. But the moment you squeeze one lightly, you can tell it is soft inside, like a pouch of earth. You let it cool, just a little, split it open, and a rush of hot steam bursts out, carrying the sweet smell of potato. The flesh within has roasted to a floury, silky softness. You sprinkle on a little salt, take a bite, and the warmth goes from your mouth all the way to your heart. Aki comes over too. You break off a little of the potato and feed it to him. He eats with obvious delight, and when he is done, he rubs against your hand, asking for more. Smiling, you shake your head and still give him another little bit. One bite for you, one bite for him, beside the warm hearth. With the storm of snow outside the window, the day stretches out as slowly as melting honey. When the potatoes are finished, you draw some of the apple cider you brewed in autumn from the oak barrel in the corner of the house and pour it into a pewter cup. The liquor is clear and bright, touched with a faint golden color. Even its scent carries the sweetness of apples and the mellow fragrance of wine. You set the cup by the fireplace to warm. Winter in the north is cold. Wine should be warmed before drinking, so it does not harm the body, and so the warmth sinks deeper. Leaning back in the armchair by the hearth, you lift the warm cider and take a small sip. First comes the full sweetness of apple, then a gentle depth of wine, which slides down your throat, and in an instant turns into a stream of warmth, spreading from your stomach through your whole body. Even your fingertips become warm, and every pore seems to open and relax. Outside, the snow still falls in thick drifting veils, showing not the least sign of stopping. You walk to the window and push it open a crack to look out. The whole world has become a sheet of white. A thick layer of snow has already gathered on the thatched roof of the stone house. In the open ground before the house, the snow rises past your ankles. The distant mountains and the nearby woods are all wrapped in a deep white blanket. Between heaven and earth, there is only silence, broken only by the soft whisper of falling snow. The only path leading beyond the mountains must certainly already be sealed shut. Now you are completely cut off from the outside world. But you do not panic at all. On the contrary, you feel an incomparable sense of peace. The heavy snow is like a natural barrier, shutting all the wars, disputes, and anxieties beyond the mountains completely outside. This stone house in the valley is your isolated island, the steadiest harbor of refuge in a troubled age. You close the window, return to the hearth, and add 2 more oak logs to keep the fire burning evenly. The red glow of the fireplace falls across your face and spreads through the whole stone house, warm and soft. Drinking your cider, listening to the snowfall outside, smelling the faint fragrance of smoked meat drifting from the smokehouse, you feel not the slightest anxiety and not the slightest loneliness. There is only a fullness of abundance and calm. Late at night, the warmth of drink slowly rises through you. You take the tongs and bury the glowing red charcoal deep beneath the thick layer of ash in the fireplace. This is called banking the fire. Embers covered by ash do not go out. They keep only a weak heat, but enough to hold the house warm through the long night. In the morning, once the ashes are raked open, the fire can be kindled again without the trouble of starting from nothing. You lift the now sleeping ache into your arms, cross the stone floor, and go into the inner bedroom. It has long since been warmed by the fireplace. Thick wool bedding and furs are spread across the bed, and beneath the covers you have already tucked a copper bed warmer filled with hot water. The bed is wonderfully warm. You lie down beneath the blankets. Through the stone wall, you can still hear the soft hiss of the falling snow outside and, farther away in the valley, the sound of the stream flowing. You close your eyes, and in your mind there rises the image of tomorrow morning. When you push open the door, heaven and earth will be one wide whiteness, thick snow covering the whole valley. The oak before the house will bow under its weight. The snowfield will hold the tracks of mountain birds and hares. The embers in the hearth will still be alive. The warmed snow water will be just right for brewing a pot of hot tea. The meat in the smokehouse will still be quietly taking in the breath of applewood smoke. The meat in the oak barrel will still be slowly taking on flavor. The sheep in the fold will still be huddled together in peace. On a winter night, when heavy snow seals the mountain, time itself seems to lose meaning and become slow and long. You keep watch over this stone house deep in the mountains, over this small patch of earth that is yours, while all the strife of a chaotic age is shut beyond the snowy peaks. You have smoked meat, apple cider, a warm hearth, the endless wind and snow, and the protection of the mountain. You are not lonely at all, and now our story, too, slowly comes to its end. That barrel of cured roe deer meat is quietly taking on flavor in the oak cask, waiting to be smoked into a glossy, rich fragrance. That sealed jar of apple cider is resting in the barrel, waiting to become still more mellow. Life here in the deep Alps is like the stream in the valley. No matter how the outer world may overturn itself, it goes on without hurry, following the path your own feet have worn, flowing steadily onward. And now, please close your eyes slowly as well. Imagine that you are sitting in that warm stone house. The embers in the hearth are leaping gently. The smoked meat soup in the cast iron pot is still steaming. The apple cider in the cup is warmed to perfection. Outside the window are the swirling snows and a long line of alpine peaks. All strife, anxiety, and weariness have been blocked by the mountain and melted by the warmth of the hearth. There is no need to mind the wind and rain beyond the mountains, no need to worry about tomorrow's road. In that isolated house deep in the mountains, there is smoked meat, good drink, warm fire, and peace. The snow falls without sound. The hearth smoke is the smoke of ordinary life. You need only sleep soundly and with a settled heart.